Um, Lots of interesting things have been happening in the design profession in recent years, and I thought maybe I'd share some of those with you. I think that the reason that design has become more prominent is because of our tie to innovation. That designers have always been known as capable of painting a picture of a positive future with their ideas in it, right? And if you think about it, that's really what innovation is having those kind of breakthrough ideas about the future, right? And so, so we as designers are being called on to work on really very interesting projects in the innovation space. So it's been really exciting for us these last few years. But it's really not enough to think of innovation as this kind of divine intervention, that you have this one big idea and then you implement it for a long time. We really think that the time has come for looking at innovation as something you can do routinely. And we're finding out that working with our clients and with the students at Stanford, that this is absolutely possible. That by giving them the kind of a methodology, the kind of right, water, so to speak, fertilizer and sunshine, you end up having this ability to come up with breakthrough ideas, put some of them on the shelf, implement some of them, but you really have this confidence that you're capable of coming up with new to the world stuff. And so it's that ability to be confident in your innovation process that is really changing the world. But, in my whole life, everybody always says things to people like me, "Oh, you're so creative." I just never rang true to me. It's not some kind of false humility. It's just really clear to me that everybody's a creative person. I mean, go to a kindergarten if you don't believe me. Young kids are really exhibit this kind of non-linear ability to jump to new places. They really do. And somehow, that's trained out of them. There's been a lot written about this, but it's my point of view that at some point kids opt out of being creative. That for me, I wasn't that athletic, and so I said to everybody, "I'm not good at sports," right? Or "I'm not athletic." And then that got me off the hook, and then I could go and play basketball and do everything else, but nobody was evaluating me because I already declared that I'm not an athlete, right? And the same thing happens with kids, unfortunately, a lot. They say, "I'm not creative." Right? And so that people like that, that really bothers me when people come up and say that. And so at places like Stanford and at IDEA, we're working on helping people build that creative confidence. And one of the most gratifying things as a teacher is I literally have hours of kids on film as we do these little videotapes, like crying, saying, "Oh, I've always felt myself as only an analytical person. I'm an engineer, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, and now I feel like I'm a creative person." We've taken them through some exercises where they've surprised themselves, and they actually now walk around in their bodies thinking of themselves as creative people. And that's really my goal, is to have that happen to as many individuals and organizations as possible. There's a lot of things about having creative confidence or design thinking or the kind of things that we talk about, but it really is a mindset. It's a way of thinking about the world and a way of thinking about yourself. It's a kind of a bias towards action or a bias towards impact. If you know design people or people who are natural design thinkers, everything's intentional to them. I mean, they're not wearing shoes at random or deciding, whether the car that they choose is a certain color or not. It's everything's intentional, and it's that bias towards doing things, so considering everything, that makes them good at innovation. So the notion is that if you can get in the mindset of thinking of yourself as this creative person, and in the mindset of, yes, I can, with some help, I can leap to new breakthrough places. That open mindset is what drives this kind of innovation that we're seeing take flight here in our world. So, in addition to having an open mindset, it's, as you might guess, it's not enough to just be confident. You have to actually be able to do something, to implement, to impact the world. And so we as designers use basically a methodology that we call design thinking. And design thinking is really just a way of looking at innovation, how you innovate. Where do you get your big ideas, right? And so you can get big ideas from having a business idea. I have this new thing. I think people will buy it if we put it together in this way. Or you can have a big idea with respect to technology, where I've invented this new thing, and I'm hoping that the rest of the world will like it. And we do innovation in that way as well. But the area that seems to be underserved is in the area of understanding humans, right? And so designers use what we call a methodology, and that methodology we call is human-centered design. And human-centered design is nothing more than going out there and really building empathy for the people that you're trying to affect, whether it's a service or a product or or whatever it is. The notion is that it's been underserved. We, big companies, organizations, tend to not go out and really mix it up with the people. I've worked with large companies that don't actually know things about their users that you would expect that they would need to know in order to be successful. And so our point of view is to get out there and do that. And so in a different to creative confidence, I thought I'd spend a couple minutes on what design thinking is, right? And give some examples. So design thinking has lots of components, but these are all things that you can incorporate into your life. It's common sense. I love it when some client who's just paid IDEO millions of dollars says, "That was fantastic, but it's kind of like common sense." And I said, "Yeah, isn't that cool? That we charge you millions of dollars for common sense? Really nice." Anyway, but so design thinking has lots of components, but the major ones that I'll talk about today are human-centered design, culture, prototyping, radical collaboration, and storytelling. So human-centered design is just what I was talking about before, building empathy for the people that you're trying to look for. So I'm just going to give one quick example of each one. Keep the Change for Bank of America. The IDEO process is we go out and we see what people are doing about their relationship with their money. Once Bank of America hired us, we look at that relationship. And people are doing all kinds of weird things, and including paying in advance so that they could make it easier for them so they didn't have to subtract, $12.16 from $15.21, and try to make things around stuff. So we incorporated the kind of things we learned from them in an offering called Keep the Change. If you know Keep the Change, it was a wild success. Keep the Change does that rounding for you. And so what we do is you only see whole numbers on your account statement, but the money, so instead of $8.20, we make that $9, but we take that 80 cents and we put it in a savings account for you. So now we've helped you start to save. Automatically you're starting to have a savings account, and turns out people now are more likely to add to that, right? In that way. And so, and bank matches it, by the way, up to a certain number. So anyway, long story short, 2.5 million new customers in the first year, 12 million new customers. Hard to get customers in a bank, and this is a wild success. But it's not like, it's not brilliance that people have trouble savings and they don't like balancing their checkbook, right? It's what you do with that so that you implement that in a way that resonates with them. So culture of prototyping. If I had to say one thing about what we need to do, I would say it has to do with this notion of a bias towards action. When we go in to kind of do an innovation audit of a company and talk about how they do different things, more often than not, how they do things is kind of a strategy thing. They do a lot of planning. They sit around a big conference table with a bunch of with yellow pads and pencils or their laptops, and they try to think their way out. We're going to do this because we're smart people. And that probably works some of the time, but we think it's much better to kind of get out into the messy world, talk to people, build prototypes, show them to them. So you learn so much more. If I don't have any fear failure, that somebody's going to say something bad about me, I build a crummy prototype, a crummy one, not a good one, a crummy one of the ideas I have about what should happen, and then other people will help you. They'll say, geez, that's a terrible idea, right? And you say, why? You always say why. And then they tell you, and then you fix it, and then you go show it to some more people. So that's much faster to me than this long planning cycle that most people take care of it. So let's say your Sesame Street is one of your big clients, which is IDEO's case, and you're trying to come up with new iPhone apps for kids, for Sesame Street age kids. Well, you're just going to have to come up with thousands of them in order to hit some that the kids resonate with, because since we're not kids, it's really hard to tell what they'll work. But we build prototypes and we show them to kids. We have play dates with kids and we show them, and then we can figure out which one's the one. So you have to quickly be able to prototype. So here's an example of how the team at IDEO came up with a way to quickly prototype iPhone apps for kids.
Cue music. So this is possible dance moves for Monster Maker. So music starts, and I'm the player, so I come in and I touch the monster, and he gives me a special dance move. I go and touch again, and he does a different one. And it can go for as long as I want, and he has a few signature moves. And when I've had enough, when I'm done dancing, I touch the back button, and it pauses, and the music stops. Monster Maker.
Cool!
Sonic! Come on, Sonic!
Wow!
So think about how quickly you can prototype something. No software involved. No, you just, Anyway, and then the other example I'll talk about as far as quick prototyping is we have classes at Stanford that seem to generate new companies all the time. Large percentage of these kids turn out to start companies out of our classes in the D School. And one of them is called Pulse. I don't know if you use Pulse, but this little team, mainly 2 guys, in a 5-week class, 5 weeks of a class, generated this iPad app. And the way they did it was just going out and seeing how people like to receive their news and building prototypes. And there was nothing other than prototyping and testing. And they ended up with the best-selling iPad app in the world. It's called Pulse, right? And now they're funded and they're a startup in Silicon Valley and they're in a garage, playing that whole game. But it really had to do with just empathy with people and building prototypes quickly, rather than thinking, well, we should be serious about this. We should, plan. We should do all those kind of things. Next thing is storytelling. Storytelling is that thing that designers do so well about painting a picture of the future with their ideas in it. I mean, it's amazing how we designers have gone from mostly hanging out in machine shops where we're building things. We're still hanging out in machine shops. But what we're really doing is make quick prototypes of the future with this idea in it. Because for some reason, people really respond, what a picture's worth 1,000 words, then a small video must be worth 10 million. Because you just see what it is and you can then help the person with whether that's going to fit into the world or not after you see this quick video. So we've gotten really good at making quick and dirty videos. My students at IDEO, quick videos seem to be the way we communicate our big ideas to the world. So this is an example done in our New York office about the future of the book. And if you want to, you can see all these things. I'm just trying to tease you about this. If you want to go to websites, you can see many, several, 3 in particular, in this case, of the future of the book. This is just one of them.
As more and more books go digital, how might we experience written narratives in new and engaging ways? Introducing Alice, an interactive reading experience that invites the reader to engage in the storytelling process. With the written narrative at the center of the Alice experience, stories unfold and develop through the reader's active participation, blurring the lines between reality and fiction. Unexpectedly, the reader stumbles upon plot twists and turns embedded in the stories that are unlocked by performing certain actions, such as being at specific geographic locations, communicating with the characters in the stories, or contributing to the stories themselves. By performing these actions, the reader co-develops the story and gains access to secret events, character backstories, and new chapters. In time, a non-linear narrative emerges, allowing the reader to immerse themselves in the story from multiple angles. Alice, an interactive and playful reading experience, that invites exploration well beyond just turning the page.
So you can see in a very short amount of time and effort, we can actually paint a picture of a completely new world around that book. And we can show it to book manufacturers, we can show it to people in different countries, we can get real traction because we painted that picture. There's nothing exists there. I mean, it's like we didn't do anything except tell that story, okay? And then there's radical collaboration. Radical collaboration is the notion that is about diversity. And people are always trying to convince me to say that, the United States is so much more creative than other countries, particular, some of my student countries, and it's just not true. I mean, the kids are equally creative in all ways. The thing that the US has is diversity. It's so easy for us to put together a team of people from, the D School has, as Kitty mentioned, the D School has students from all over the university, all 7 schools, doctors, lawyers, business people, social scientists. We put them all in teams together, and you can just think about what happens when you put an anthropologist and an opera singer and a particle physicist and a lawyer on a team. Well, one thing's for sure, the ideas that come out of that team will never be reproduced in another way, right? That kind of collaboration in that radical way. So we've been talking about teams collaborating for a long time, but today it's reality and it's working as far as creating new ideas. The hardest group I ever tried to put together for anything I've ever done is the Stanford faculty. Really difficult. I mean, professors don't have any muscles about collaboration whatsoever. They've been in their little silos, writing their papers and managing their graduate students, and so it was a really difficult thing to put them together. But I'm here to say that what they do is basically fight in front of the students during class, and the students love it, right? Because the students have to figure out for themselves what they believe once you have the professors not agreeing. So that the notion that there's a right answer just goes completely away, right? My favorite thing is at some point some young aggressive student raises their hand and says, "Who's doing the grading here?" They've been so used to pleasing the teacher, and when you got a bunch of people that are disagreeing, how do you answer the question? At IDEO, we've done all kinds of radical collaborations, but my favorite one now is Open IDEO, where the notion is, if IDEO is going to put a team of 5 to 10 people on a different project, what happens if you put 50,000 or 100,000 people on that project, right? By using all the people of the world that are interested in, we get to manage that project, and we get to be the process leaders of showing how you use design thinking to work on this problem. But the great thing is we get these teams all over the world working on really interesting projects. So the good news is it's working. At IDEO, we used to basically do product design, where we design very interesting things, but now we're being asked to do work on really interesting projects, and things like improving the Social Security payment system, getting children to eat the right things for the CDC, the Red Cross, the Gates Foundation's Water in Africa. These are big, hairy problems that design thinking is working on, and the results are quite good. The other thing is that Stanford, the other half of my life, is working extremely well. Embrace is one, as I said, we're rolling out these companies all the time. Embrace is one of the companies that we're rolling out in India. The product is live now. Turns out there are millions of babies dying in India every year because of low birth weight, and they can't keep themselves warm. And incubators cost $20,000, and they're not that available, and you don't live near the hospital, you don't have a chance, your baby dies, okay? So these kids went to see that, and they saw this when they did their need finding. We call it need finding when you go out and try to have empathy for the users, and they made this basically a sleeping bag, right? It has paraffin wax that you can heat up in it, but anyways, it's just going out there, and they believe hundreds of thousands of babies' lives will be saved by this little sleeping bag from a company called Embrace. Started in one of our classes. Same thing with Delight. Delight is a solar lantern that replaces kerosene. We sent the kids over, we used to give them a topic, we sent them over to look at water. They went and looked at water, but one of the groups, one of the things about design is you're allowed to change the problem you're working on. You don't have to just do the problem that we were given. If you find a better problem, you work on that better problem. And they, when looking at water, noticed that kids their lungs were being filled with the carbon from the kerosene in the lanterns in the little rooms, and so they decided to take on that problem instead of water. And now I can't tell you how many are shipped, but they've been very successful in making a solar lantern that you go to work during the day, you leave the solar lantern outside, and then to charge, and then at night you don't have to burn kerosene, you can use this light. Right? So design is being used to do fantastic things, and we couldn't be more pleased with the seats at the table that we have now. So this is our Change the World strategy. You know, by giving people creative confidence and a methodology on how to implement their ideas, we think that they'll make better decisions, right? And that's to change the world. I mean, I don't care if the decisions are throwing a better dinner party or curing cancer. Those are all important decisions, and we really believe that this way of thinking and this mindset can have that kind of impact.